software startups. Great place, wonderful community. And then over at CoMotion headquarters, which is right over by the Trader Joe's, if you know where that is, there is a VR and AR focused startup incubator. All of these are dedicated to trying to spin out new ideas, many from the University of Washington, some from outside, spin out new ideas to the community and build up the economy in the state of Washington. So we're very proud of that. And we're very proud today to be hosting Luni. Couple things that are coming up before we get started. Next week, Patrick Gray is going to be talking about biotech startups in the same space. Patrick is somebody who has been focused on drug discovery for critical diseases. His companies came out with interferon alpha and interferon gamma and the vaccine. He started at Genentech and Icos and Macrogenics before they were big. So he has a lot of experience with drug discovery and just pushing out new biomedical applications. He's going to be great. He's also running a startup now in Sioux Falls, Pascal Biosciences. So that's going to be fantastic. Wednesday, May 17th, Waffle Wednesday over in Startup Hall. If you have not been to Waffle Wednesday over in Startup Hall, please check it out. The waffles are amazing. They have every topping imaginable. They do have some gluten-free waffles that they make on a special waffle machine if you have a gluten intolerance. And the company is fantastic. It's always a really great networking opportunity.
When is it? When on Wednesdays?
Waffle Wednesday. It's at 8:30 in the morning until 10:30 in the morning. Great question. And then Friday, May 19th, 2 weeks away, Salesperson is going to talk about raising capital from the entrepreneur's perspective. You may have heard of him before. He was the co-founder of Movisante and the CEO of Movisante. And they were the first company that tried to come out with a very technical device, in this case an ultrasound device, that could be used with a mobile phone. And the reason for that was so that you could have ultrasound in places around the world that don't have access to an actual $40,000 ultrasound machine. So he's written a book on technology at the margins, which is an amazing book. And before he was with Movisante, he helped manage all of the venture capital that Microsoft was putting out. And so he's just an amazing person to be talking about raising capital. Today, we have Luni, who I'm a total fangirl of. Luni runs the accelerator Fledge here. He runs the seed fund Aviary. He has been an EIR with the University of Washington. That's an entrepreneur in residence. That's somebody who goes to our companies and helps advise them about various aspects of being a startup. He's currently an EIR with Pinchot University. He wrote the Next Step books. The Next Step books, if you haven't seen them, if you are an entrepreneur or want to be an entrepreneur, you should really check them out. They kind of go through, okay, well, what do I do when I want to deal with capital raising? What do I do when I need to deal with my cap table? What do I do when I need to develop a marketing plan or financing plan? And there's a different book and series for all of these, and kind of it is in fact the next step. So that's a great thing. We are very honored to have him, and he's going to be talking about mentorship.
All right, thanks for having me here. Today I'm going to tell you some stories of mentoring, and I had to change the title because it's now 70 companies, or at least it's 70 companies through Fledge and more through other means. Here's my background. So I am a 25-year serial entrepreneur. So I started myself as a first-time entrepreneur here in Seattle in 1992 with a dream. The dream was to write software for what was then this brand new idea of a post-PC economy based on what we would now call tablets. Right, so I started a software company. Eventually it was called Nimble, and we were 17 years too soon. So timing is really important in startups. Maybe lesson number one here is timing is really important in startups. Apple sold more tablets in 2010 when they announced the iPad in a minute than all of the tablet computers in the 90s combined. All the PDAs, all the smartphones, everything that everyone tried, including Palm, Apple bested them in a minute. And then I went on to do a few more software companies after that. All of them are still going except for Nimble. All the ones after Nimble were all venture-backed. So I've played the game of venture-backed software companies I've won that game. It is a game. It's a little bit of a startup lottery, but that's not what I'm talking about today. And then in 2011, my last software company left town on me. We merged it with another startup. It went off to New York City, and I was free to do anything I wanted. And I had started hanging out in the back of a school that at the time was called Bainbridge Graduate Institute. Then it became Pinchot University. Actually, now we have to redo the bio again. It's part of Presidio Graduate School. Those are the first two schools in the world to teach how to do good while doing business, or how to do good by doing business. That's where I learned about this, and from that started Fledge, the Conscious Company Accelerator. And most of the talk's going to be about Fledge and fledglings. In the midst of all that, I became an entrepreneur in residence for what was then called the Center for Commercialization, which is now CoMotion. And while here, I helped my first about 12 companies trying turn into companies at least, and I succeeded with one. So out of 12 tries, one spun out and became its own company. Lots of things happened to the other ones. All right, so let's focus on Fledge. In short, for those of you in this room, you probably are well more aware of Techstars, right? Because it's on campus, right? It's at Startup Hall. Fledge is a copy of Techstars. So there's a quote out there. It's actually a quote by Steve Jobs attributed to Pablo Picasso, which says, "Good artists steal and good artists copy and great artists steal." That's in fact a misquote. Picasso never said that. Jobs did say that, but Picasso never said that. Someone else said something similar to that, but not exactly like that, because Jobs was good at lines. Right. The best way to create a startup that works is to copy a startup that's working. So Techstars was a 6-year-old startup in 2011. I took their model. I became one of their mentors. I took their model, jumped in. I talked to Chris DeVore, who runs the show. I talked to the companies that were in the program. I talked to the other mentors. And then the Microsoft Accelerator spun up that subsequent year. I talked to the director of that one and the companies that were in there. I was a lead mentor in that program. That was also powered by Techstars. And I talked to teams running in lots of different accelerators around the world, trying to find out whether or not accelerators work at all. That's still an open question. I don't think it should be an open question, but it's still an open question. And to find out if they do work, what makes them work, and then copied that and made it better. So that's what Fledge is. So we find the best companies from around the world. We invest in them. We pay them money to come to work for our program. We make them better, and we send them home. We've been doing that for 5 years. We have done that for 63 graduates and 6 current teams in the program here in Seattle, 4 of which are in the room, and we'll tell you what they do later. Okay. It's turned into this big global company. Just kind of fun and amazing and scary at the same time. So Fledge is run by this little team of 1 full-time persons in the city of Seattle, which is me, and a lot of helpers. We have gotten applications from about 1,200 companies from 95 countries in the world over the past 5 years. We have accepted applicants from 22 different countries. We run programs currently in 2 cities, and 2 more are announced. So by next summer, we will have run programs in 4 different countries. And we get applications, I said that already, but we get applications from just about everywhere. And what's amazing in this world of 2017, or even in the world of 2011, is that one person can run a global company and reach everyone on the planet that they want to reach, and make a business out of that. Right? That was not possible in '92 when I started my first company. Right? That was, 92, we still were advertising by buying ads in paper newspapers. Right? We were still debating whether or not we needed a yellow page ad. Right? If you remember the yellow pages. All right, on the back end, a little tiny bit of view of sausage making. We get a lot of applications. So we just had our deadline on Sunday for Fledge 10 in Peru. There are 234 companies. Oh, sorry, this is the Fledge 9 view, but there's 225 companies in the Fledge 10 view. I didn't want to show that because we haven't picked the companies yet. This was the view from 5 months ago. So January 31st-ish, 4 months ago, we said apply to Fledge 9. We had 234 just in this interface, and then there were 2 other interfaces. We then had to sort through them all. So just take that for a fact. You know, a lot of people in the audience are entrepreneurs wondering, like, how do you get going? How do you get help and whatnot? Well, one of the opportunities and one of the issues and one of the difficulties is there are a lot of startups out there. So my little tiny program, right, it's a world-known program, but it's still small, gets about 250 applications each time we ask for them. And we only work with 7 companies. So you're all here at UW. You can do some math there, right? And it varies, you know, whether we take 7 or 8 makes a huge difference on the percentages. We had a snafu, which is why we have 6. We did accept 7. It's harder to get into Stanford Business School than it is to get into Fledge. It's way easier to get into Fledge than Techstars, like a factor of 2. So basically, what I tell everyone who applies to my program is the odds are we're going to reject you, right? By far. Odds are you have a 97% chance we're going to say no, right? Which I'm staring at 6 people back here who are just like, well, but I got in. You know, there's a 98 or 99% chance you get rejected by Techstars or Y Combinator when you apply. That's just the fact. But somebody gets in, right? And like everything in startups, right? If you don't try, then you have a 100% chance of failure. Right? The only chance you have to succeed is to try. So lo and behold, some people do get in, right? And when they get in, they get a ton of help. And there are, luckily, enough programs like this in the world that hundreds of companies get into these programs and get help, right? Just not tens of thousands. All right, so what happens when you get in? What do we do with these companies? Well, basically 3 things, 3 big buckets. One is we teach them entrepreneurship. So one difference between Fledge and other programs is the depth we go into education. I happen to teach entrepreneurship at that other school, at what's now Presidio Graduate School. I have in my history taught entrepreneurship at UW back in 2000. Gray hairs. I taught software entrepreneurship with Emer Dooley in 2000, back in the dot-com bubble. It was kind of fun. I don't think it's been taught since then, or it shouldn't have been. It should not have been taught since then. It was a class about starting software companies. So what we do is we try and fill in all the gaps that our entrepreneurs have. Every entrepreneur I've ever met has a gap somewhere. This could be, I don't know how to sell. I've never sold. Maybe I not that I don't know, but I don't have any experience on how to do sales. Can you teach me that? Or I don't have any experience on building a website or doing marketing. Or I don't have any experience in doing the financial side of business. Or how to raise money. Or how to actually put together a real business plan that someone would look at and go, that seems reasonable. And there's a whole lot of different pieces you need to know. Key theory I have on why entrepreneurs fail is that they're missing something. They're missing one of these skills. And if you're missing one of these skills, easiest one to describe is sales. If you've never done sales and it scares the hell out of you, which it should, and you fail at it when you try and go find those customers, well, then you're going to fail as a company because you don't have any sales. And people go, well, you'll just hire a salesperson, right? Clearly, you can fill in any gap you want with a hire. I'm going to say, well, yeah, but how are you going to pick the right salesperson? If you've never done sales, how do you know you've picked the right salesperson? If you've never done sales and they fail at selling your product, is it because they're a crappy salesperson? Let me say that, we're on internet video. Or do you have the wrong product? Well, you can't tell because you don't know whether or not they're a good salesperson or not. Right? And the same thing is true for every single little aspect of your company. So entrepreneurs are generalists. They need to be generalists. You can be good at something, but you can be really good at something, but you got to be decent at everything, which is not what we're taught in school, right? You don't go I've never met a university student who is majoring in generalization. I don't think they'll let you do that, right? You have to pick something. All right, so at Fledge, we spend about 5 weeks running through 6 books of content, and they'll attest to it, but it's rather intense. It comes really fast, and you can never finish all the work that's assigned to you. All right, second piece is something that you find in a lot of these programs, which is mentors. We have over 440 mentors, according to the chart there. We use a technique that was invented by Techstars in our program, which is called mentor whiplash. And so this is a key piece that's really subtle, that's not talked about enough. The only people I've ever heard talk about it is like Brad Feld and the other people at Techstars. We bring so many people to our teams that they tell us to stop doing that. The amount of opinions you get and the amount of advice you get does a few things for you. 1, it gives you ideas you didn't have, and 2, makes you realize that no one knows the business better than you do. And so unlike most programs where you're assigned a coach, right? If you go through the UW business plan competition, you're given a coach or 2. They'll help you tweak your pitch a bit. There's a huge difference between getting a coach or 2 and having 30 people help you with your pitch. It's a vastly different experience. It's very hard to describe. We do the latter. It works much better. Right? I don't know any way to do this outside of one of these programs. Most of the other programs in the world get you that coach or 2. What you really want to succeed is way more mentors than you think is reasonable. And the last thing we do is we teach our teams how to tell stories. We basically teach them how to do TED Talks instead of investor pitches, which is also something that's subtle and hard to describe. So everyone here has seen a TED Talk, right? Right? It's ubiquitous these days. Do you know how hard it is to do a TED Talk? Has anyone done a TEDx Talk? Not a single hand in the audience. Okay. A TEDx Talk is pretty difficult. I'd say it takes about a month to do it well. A TED Talk on the stage in Vancouver takes 3 months of effort, many iterations, and is something that's not taught in, maybe taught in theater school, not taught to most of us in the world. We shrink that down to 3 weeks, and we do our best to teach that to every one of our fledglings because we put them all on stage and expect them to do a TED Talk. And I'd say most of them don't get there. Most of them don't get to that quality. They get to maybe TEDx quality. But we nonetheless put them on stage, make them do the best they can. And that skill of telling a story then sticks with them and helps them with the rest of their company building, because what you need to do as an entrepreneur is tell your story. You need to go and convince investors, and they really don't want to see statistics. They don't want to see your hockey stick. They don't believe that. They don't want to see the opportunity size that much in such great depth. They really don't want to go through your financial model. They want to believe your story. And so if you can tell a great story, you can get investors. For the American companies, it's really hard to get people to join in on your startup and join your team because everyone you want already has a job. So you have to convince them. You have to convince them and get them excited about what you're doing, and that is a storytelling opportunity. You got to get customers. You want them to take a chance on your brand new company. That's a big stretch. Tell them a great story. They'll come on, or the odds that they come on are much higher. Yeah?
So what was your story when you were starting your company over tech?
Which one?
The Fledge, like you were starting.
Oh, the original story was there's a huge amount of help for all these tech companies. There's Techstars and Startup Weekend, and I named like 6 more things. And there's nothing for socially conscious companies. And it was a slight hyperbole because there actually was a little bit. But in comparison, there was nothing. And I could also wax on about statistics of financing. I said, and what we really need to do is to bring the best practices from the tech accelerator world and the tech ecosystem and bring it to social and environmental good startups. And that's all, and I told it to the people who thought that was a reasonable idea, and they took out their checkbook and they made it possible. And I also told that story to the entrepreneurs in the world that I thought would resonate, who were not doing software companies, Fledge won 45 companies agreed that that was a reasonable idea and were willing to take the chance of us paying them to come to the program. And we accepted 7, and then we're off to the races. And then mentors just show up. All right, so let me tell you about a few of these companies who have graduated, and then we'll get the live companies, and then we'll open up to questions. All right, most impactful company I've ever seen is called Evernew, based in Seattle. They have a chemical technology that recycles cotton. So almost every piece of clothing I can see in this room is now recyclable. Right? And that was not true. 2 years ago, every piece of clothing would be thrown away. Burn Manufacturing is the largest producer of clean cook stoves in Eastern Africa, maybe all of Africa. When they came and pitched Fledge 1, there were 4, let's call them hippies, from Vashon Island who dreamed of making cook stoves in Kenya. Nobody had ever tried doing anything like that before. They dreamed of raising $4 million to go do that. And today they build 10,000 stoves a month. They've raised about $9 million to go do that. And they're profitable. Aini, those 2 women there, started a company 8 years ago in Peru. They wanted to employ Peruvian women making clothing using Peruvian materials and have these women work in their indigenous homes. And so they did that. They bootstrapped it. They sell their clothing. It's high-end women's clothing, sold in Europe, US, and Asia, made basically by hand by 350 Peruvian women in the Andes. East Africa Fruits. He came here, he was about 23 or 24. He dreamed of 2 things. One, bringing the cold chain to Tanzania, right, which is basically refrigerated warehouses, and exporting fruits and vegetables from Tanzania. He's succeeded at the first dream so far. So he works with about 300 farmers in Tanzania. He's brought their average income from about $600 a year. I'll say that one again, $600 a year, which is the average from Tanzania. And he's brought them up to about $2,000 a year. And he's built out the first private cold storage warehouse in the country. And hopefully we start exporting next year. Agua Piedra Mezcal, they applied 3 times. This is starting to be a theme. We have someone in the room who applied 4 times. Applied 3 times to Fledge to get in. They make mezcal, which is tequila is to mezcal what moonshine is to scotch. Right? They make it in Oaxaca, Mexico, which is where mezcal comes from. And it's made by 3rd-generation mezcaliares, and they're exporting this product to Europe right now, teeny bit in the US. So they're basically trying to take the second poorest state in Mexico and bring them some income using something they already knew how to make. Shift Labs, based in Seattle by a UW former professor. They make low-cost medical devices. This is the first one. It's called the Drip Assist. It clips on an IV bag and tells you how fast the medicine is infusing. The state-of-the-art for this in the world, they sell this all over the world. The state-of-the-art is to look and guess. To look at the drips, maybe count your pulse and say, that looks about right. In the US, we use $2,000 infusion pumps to do this if we want accuracy. But in most clinics, they use their watch and they look at the drips and they go, that looks about right. So they fixed that problem. This is Yusuf Tura. If you use Lyft in the city of Seattle, he may drive you one day. He drives a Lyft for a living. He's a refugee who came here from Ethiopia when he was a teenager after the big drought and unrest in Ethiopia. So basically saved as a teenager. He was starving in Kenya as a refugee for 3 years. He went back home. He decided he needed to help because he saw how, what he got to escape from. And he started making cook stoves with his brother who was still there. They were, until Bern passed them up, the largest cook stove manufacturer in the continent of Africa. They've produced over 250,000 of these stoves here, all made from recycled materials, all made in Ethiopia by Ethiopians, for $7.25 a piece, and they've been profitable since they've started. It's the only company of its kind in the entire world that produces at that scale of production without any high-tech materials, without a factory. They literally sit on the ground and hammer them together. Sometimes it's really simple. If you've ever had escargot in the United States, you know it doesn't taste very good. And the reason is it's all imported in cans from Europe. So Little Grape Farms is growing them in Quilcene, fresh. And then the last one on here, so Fledging's will be up in a second. Arclight, he applied 3 times. The entrepreneurs from Argentina, he had this dream of getting rid of plastic waste. So if you don't know, there's like 300 million tons of plastic waste per year around the world. About 7% gets recycled. So the rest of it just winds up in landfills or in the ocean or just dumped. So he takes plastic waste of any kind, it doesn't matter, basically compresses them into artificial stones, and those stones replace quarry stone in and under concrete. Really simple idea. He got some funding, he's up and running. First production is out, first customers are buying. First production systems in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Second one hopefully will be here in Seattle. All right, so why don't you guys come up and tell us what you do. Two sentences. Or 3
Okay.
sentences.
Thank you. I'm Audra Jung. I'm here from Bridge Care Finance. This is us, our new logo. So what we do, for most adults, the hardest job you will ever do in your life is one that does not pay but will cost you money, lots of money. It's called parenthood. So what we do is we offer payment plans for childcare that roll over into a college savings account. So it's a 21st century solution to being a parent and making it work.
Okay, come into the middle-ish.
Oh, yeah.
So you're on camera. Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Joel, founder of Jolex. I come from Kampala, the capital city of Uganda, and it only has 1,000 flushable toilets. And what we do is build the rest.
Hi, my name is Brian from Biogen, Kenya, Nairobi. And cooking oil is eventually not good for cooking. And at Biogen, we collect this all over restaurants in Nairobi and export it as feedstocks to biofuel processors globally.
Hi guys, my name is Soji and I'm with Africa Business Radio. And what we do is, there are many reasons why businesses fail in Africa. Of course, the complexity of the continent is one of the reasons why people say, when you expand to the continent, you find it difficult to actually, run a successful business. And what we'll do is just basically try to help these businesses and make them successful. Thank you.
Yeah, why don't you guys hang out in case they have questions for you. The other two who could not make it are brand new named Golden Cat. Is like East Africa Fruits. They are a fruit and vegetable aggregator and processor and exporter from Rwanda. And then Zirconia is out looking at a nuclear power plant right now because they have a, how do they do this? Room temperature spray-on ceramic coating that stops rust forever. And so that seems to be useful for things like oil and gas and nuclear power plants. All right, so that is what we do. Oh, lastly, just, and the reason we do it is because all the stories of startups look like this and sound like this, right? If you've seen the Startup Network, right? Crazy kid, freshman, has this idea that he stole about a Facebook-like thing, and then the next thing you know, he's a billionaire. But that never happens. That has never happened once in the history of mankind, as best I know, and I collect these stories. It always looks like this. So what we do in our program and programs like ours is to try and get rid of some of those loops. Try and skip them over because some of those are common loops. And what they don't tell you and what we don't tell you, is most companies don't wind up popping out the top. Top is success, right? Most of them get lost in the loops and die there. And so we hope that by snipping off the loops, more companies pop out the top. Right? And I've been doing that for 5 years. I hope to do this until the day I die, which is many years from now. Any questions? Yeah.
I got a question for Biogen. So, do you go to the restaurants and say, hey, I'll buy this cooking oil from you, and then you make the profit by shipping it? I mean, how does your business run?
So 2 things happened in the restaurants in Nairobi that never used to happen until we came in. So they'd either pour it down the drain, or a small and cheaper restaurant would go and buy the reused cooking oil and reuse it because it's a business margin. So we stop that because and it's very unhealthy. So what we go and do is that we go and take it out from them, and then we, for free, and we export it, and that's how we get the revenues.
At what level of the startup do you take them on?
What you'll see if you look at the industry in general is that 5 years ago, everyone was taking idea stage companies. And these days, almost every company that comes into a program like Fledge already has revenues. So we've seen this transition. It's kind of equivalent to the transition I've seen in 20 years. When I first did venture-backed software companies, we could get funded on a PowerPoint, right? No customers, no nothing, just PowerPoint. These days, that's next to impossible, right? And so there's just a trend toward traction is the key word. Nonetheless, if we flip back to the 8 we have up here, Zirconia has no customers. They're an idea stage company with some prototypes out there. And BridgeCare, the 2 founders were students in my class. This is an idea that got incubated in my MBA class last year, and now we're making it a real company. So if they didn't know me that well, they may have still gotten in. Right, we generally do 1 or 2 idea stage companies per session.
Do you think that this transition that you mentioned is healthy, or is it a sign of maturity of this field? Or?
It's inevitable. So what happens to we're investors, right? We're putting money down. What happens for investors is you want to take less and less risk over time. As you learn what doesn't work, you want to stop making mistakes of things that don't work. It's way higher risk to do idea stage than not. And at the same time, it's getting cheaper and cheaper to start companies. So when I started my first company in 1992, there was no infrastructure for companies. There was no cloud. Web hadn't been invented, actually, or got invented that year. So our marketing cost way more. Our marketing to get something out. There was nothing like MailChimp. Most people didn't have an email address. Basically every tool that I use now to run my company didn't exist except Excel. And even then, to run Excel, my computer cost $3,000 in 1992 dollars, right? And it was not a laptop. It was a desktop with a CRT on top of it, right? And a tower next to it. So as things get cheaper, it becomes easier to get traction. It gets easier to get to the first or second customer, and therefore you don't need a professional investor to give you the money. You don't need the guidance to get there. And so I think it's okay, right? If it starts to get more expensive to do companies, then maybe not. Yeah?
I know to get in the company you have to have sales and customers, but aside from that, what is a big difference between companies that don't get in and companies that do get in?
Oh, get into the program like this?
Mm-hmm.
Repeat the question.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
Oh.
So the question is, the question asked specifically was what gets companies in, right, besides traction and customers? And I'll just interpret that to be the bigger question is how on earth do you get in? So for Fledge, our 3 criteria are team, impact, and odds of success. And so I'd say for most programs, it's team and odds of success, right? We're an impact-oriented accelerator. So what do we mean by team, right? So we rate everybody on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 is this team has experience in the industry that they're targeting. They know people in that industry. They already have contacts there. The potential for them to get a customer seems pretty good. Or at least they know who they need to talk to. That would be a 5, right? And we don't meet that many 5s, because what happens is people get really excited about an idea, and it's in an area that they don't really know. So then we get down to a 4, which is they just seem really smart, right? They're smart. They seem to know what they're doing. They have good, good track record of doing other things. So we believe that they can probably pull this one off. And then 3 would be, we like them. I don't know if they're going to succeed or not. 1 is they're nice people, right? Everybody gets at least a 1, right? Well, some of them don't get rated. And then in terms of impact, you can see the scales here. We're going to make all clothing recyclable, which is $1 trillion annual business, right? And the biggest polluter on the planet in terms of growing cotton uses more pesticides and more herbicides than anything we eat. It's a humongous business. We'd love to get rid of the growth of cotton. So that's hugely impactful. Down to, we're going to get rid of the cooking oil in Kampala. And if we can do it in Kampala, we can probably do it in Dar es Salaam and, Nairobi. If we can do it in Nairobi, we can do it in Kampala and Dar es Salaam and Lagos and in the rest of Africa. And if it works there, it'll work in Asia and so forth. Kind of those 2 ends of the spectrum on impact. And then odds of success are really complicated. Odds of success has a bunch of sub-factors. How much competition, how big is the opportunity? How much money is it going to take to go grab that opportunity? How much competition is there in order to worry about? How much money do the founders have? Like, are they going to, this is one issue that I've seen that's vastly different between my world of social good I live in and my old world of tech. In the tech world, you see entrepreneurs all the time, all over this city. They have what they think is the best idea in the world, because every entrepreneur has the best idea in the world. They're at Techstars, or they're at some other program, or they're just at some angel group and they're pitching, and you meet them a year later and you ask what happened, and they say, well, didn't work out. And then they're doing something else. That doesn't happen in the world of social good. These people will be doing what they're doing for the next 5 years, whether I help them or not, whether they get any money or not. So I call that staying power. And some people have more than others. And then there was a few other minor factors together. But between all that, the way we do it is we take all those factors. They actually have numbers, 1 to 5, 1 to 4, 1 to 2. They get put into a mathematical model, and it tells us which are the most likely companies to fail. And we reverse sort that, and we look at the top list, right? So, which is not the most likely to succeed. It's the most likely not to fail. And then we pick 7.
What are the success rates of, so you take 7 of these companies, and how well?
Yeah, so we have, including these, we have 70 companies, and 9 are dead. So 85% are still alive, right? Not claiming success on 85%. I'm claiming 9 have given up.
Did they die after the 5 years?
Some died 2 months after the program, and some died 3 years later. And we're only 5 years old, so none of them died after 6 years yet. But most of those 9 dead are from cohort 1 and 2. So I'll say part of that is because those are the oldest. Most of that is because we used to take all idea stage companies. So most of those were idea stage companies that did not make it past the idea stage. Yes?
Yeah, I got a question. So you do toilets, is that right?
Yeah.
So was the big problem that people culturally don't want to use a type of place to go to the bathroom, or is it just wasn't available? And if that's the case, how do you get people to use your new product?
The big problem is that there are hardly any facilities. So with 3 million people in Kampala city, 70% of those live within urban slums. And these hardly have any access. If they do have, they have what we call pit latrines. Yeah, and at the moment, even those pit latrines in most of those communities are either filled up or beaten down. So to answer your question, they hardly have any access.
So how many of the 3 million people in Kampala were living in Kampala 10 years ago?
I would say about 1 million.
Yeah, okay. So 2 million people moved to Kampala in the last 10 years, mostly in the last 5 years.
Yes.
And there just weren't any toilets there.
Okay. So are you making? So I'm American. When I think of a toilet, like the flush and water kind, what kind of toilets are you making?
Yeah, we are building the modern toilets. We build them and operate them in these communities.
So how many have you made?
At the moment, we've put up one has 4 toilets and 2 bathrooms, but we are operating in a community of 100. Yeah, two showers. We are operating in a community of 100,000 people with less than 10 public sanitation facilities, excluding our one.
So we do a lot. I'm going to jump in. We do a ton of work in Africa. If you come look at the fledgling website, Fledge website, you'll see about half of our fledglings are from developing world. Most of them are from Africa. There's some just great parallels. In this case, if you looked at the history of the public toilet in London in 1800, you would see exactly the same problem. There were no public toilets in London. People built them. That's where like the black and white tile comes from, right? The whole idea of this sanitary facility. And they used to charge a shilling to go and use the toilet. And it stayed a shilling for 100 years. And a shilling, a British shilling, was at like 4 or 5 cents in 1800. And today it costs 200 Ugandan shillings to go use the facility. And that's like 4 or 5 cents. So all we're doing is taking an idea that's 200 years old and bringing it to a place that just hasn't had it applied yet. And nothing tells us, right, in terms of should it work? Yeah, absolutely should work. We don't have to, there's no software here. There's no chemical process. A second. There's no giant invention. There's a 200-year-old idea that anyone else should have done 200 years ago. Joel's just crazy enough to try to do it. And crazy enough to have applied 3 times trying to convince me that he was right. And he didn't convince me he was right until he won a competition. He won $10,000. He turned that into a toilet facility and told me people were coming. So, I'm as skeptical as everyone else. There's one way back there.
I'm sorry, I don't know anything about toilet infrastructure, but do you guys do like the infrastructure, the piping, any of those things related to toilet, or is it just?
Yes, we do. We design, build, and set up the toilet infrastructure.
And operate.
Okay,
so the question was, what exactly do they do? So they're building a public toilet facility. Toilet and shower, just to be clear. So if you find yourself in Kampala and you need to go, and you happen to be in this one perfect neighborhood, you can whip out 200 shillings, you can pay a fee, and you can go and it'll be clean. And you can wash your hands at the end, just like you would do here, and leave. It would be a normal Western experience, normal developed world experience. And if you're in the wrong neighborhood, hold it in. Yes, sir.
I have a question. So most of the toilets are provided some of the toilets are provided by the government in other countries. Have you had experience dealing with the local government? Are they supporting your project, or have they invested? Or
Okay, hold on. I'm supposed to repeat the question. So it's most of the places governments do toilets. Are they supporting what you're doing?
Governments aren't supporting what I'm doing. In fact, to elaborate more on that, the government gets a lot of funding for such projects back home, but you'll find that they're never implemented. There are public toilets that are built by the government back home, but since they are public and they're supposedly free, you find that no one here can actually go into them. Yeah, so
they're dirty, they're smelly, they're disgusting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a good example This might be the best example in the room of why we think it's possible for for-profit companies to fix problems of the world and to do it at scale. So in terms of a business, right, it sounds like a charity. He's running toilets. It's not a charity at all. It's a business. You build a facility, it costs about $10,000, which is, in Kampala, a huge amount of money. Right? Our employees at this company cost us $300 a year. Right? The person who's there collecting the money, we pay that person. Hopefully we'll overpay them, we'll pay them $500, but we only have to pay them $300 a year. So $10,000 is a lot of people, right, in equivalent. And then we're only charging 5 cents, 4.5, 5 cents. It's like 6 cents to take a shower. But when you add up the number of people who come in and use the facility minus the costs of running it, we think we can pay back that $10,000 within a year and a half, which means within 2 years we can build another facility on profits. So our goal at Fledge is to try and figure out, like, what's the minimum we need to start with. It's not one. One is fine, but how many? We need to build 5 more or 10 more. And when we have 10 more, that means every year and a half we can have 10 more, and then 20 more, and then 40 more, and then 80 more. So how long does it take us to get to 1,000 facilities? How long does it take us to get to 1 million people in Kampala paying to use the toilet and having a clean toilet? Right? And that's feasible. Sounds like a huge stretch, but that might be 5 years away. Right? And it might be 5 years away on $200,000 or $500,000 in investment, not $100 million of investment. Right? Which is kind of crazy. It should be, if we're all correct on this, too small for the Gates Foundation to ever fund. And we have talked to them. They write big checks. In the back there, yes. Yeah.
So when you determine success, like how are you balancing impact versus financial return on investment? What does that look like?
Okay, so the question is, what is success? Key metric, first key metric of Fledge is how many of these companies are still running? Because if they're not running, they're not doing any impact. So this is why off the top of my head I know how many are dead. Second metric is how impactful are they in total? There's a big open question in the world of impact on how do you measure that. I have an answer to that. It's called the Pinchot Impact Index. It's another one of my books. And the answer right now is I haven't done the Fledge 9 one. Through Fledge 8, I think it's 0.63, which doesn't mean anything to anyone in the room, which is fine. It's a number. It tells you how impactful it is, and every time I measure it, it goes up. So that's good news. The anecdote way I like to talk about it is that my personal goal is that the fledglings improve the lives of every human, tree, and fish on the planet. And if we can hit that, then I'll be happy. And I call it seems a little audacious. I include the fish and the trees just so we include the environment. Is that good enough? All right. Yeah.
So if I'm a startup company and it's just an idea right now, what advice would you give me to do, and what are the first steps and advice that you would give me before I came to you and I applied?
Okay. So question is, if I have an idea, how do I get started?
Right.
Yeah. You do a few things. One, put aside any doubt you have that you need to share. There's a lot of fear out there that, I have this best idea in the world, and if I share it, someone will steal it. It does happen, but it's so rare, it's inconsequential. So the only way you're going to move forward is by sharing the idea. So first and foremost, do that. Second, go and since we're broadcasting here on the internet, go look around your community and see what assets there are to help startups, and go grab them. And that means, it could be Startup Weekend. It could be events like this. It could be mentoring on your campus. There's tons of events in the city of Seattle. There's something every day for startups. Go and grab them and ask for help. The best entrepreneurs are relentless. The best entrepreneurs are relentlessly resourceful they ignore what resources they have. They make a list of resources they need, and they go and get them. And so you just go and get them, which is, sounds crazy, but you don't get them by not asking. So you just go around asking people for things that you don't think you deserve, right? Besides money, right? I need a new website. Can you build me a new website, right? Every once in a while you'll come across someone and the answer will be yes. But if you don't ask them, then you'll never get a yes, right? Unless you happen to have a big pool of money that you can call upon, because funders don't give money to ideas anymore. I will shill the book. So, right, I sat down and wrote this book while being an entrepreneur in residence in this program, because I kept meeting students and researchers on this campus who didn't know the first thing to do. So at that point, I had 20 years experience being an entrepreneur, never took a class. So I just sat down and said, well, I don't know what I know. Let me just write it down. And so there's 55, 60 questions in the first book.
What's the first book?
Yeah, just the first book. It just basically asks you a series of questions. Answer them, and you have the outline of a business plan. And then when you want to go deeper, the next book tells you how to do marketing and sales, and the next book tells you how to do a financial model. And the next book tells you the realities of funding, which is not fun. And the next book tells you how to put together a pitch. And the last book tells you how to split equity amongst your founding team if you get that far. And more books are coming. So you take it a little teeny bit at a time. We heard from you a few times, so back there.
Sorry if I missed it, but how does Fledge make money off of helping other companies get off the ground?
Oh, awesome question. So question is, how's Fledge make money? What you saw was the opening of the investor pitch, and I just cut it off on the business model. So the next slide would have been, we pay $20,000 to each team, or we invest $20,000 in cash in each team in exchange for a small percentage ownership of that company. And then we structure that in a way that's different from most. We structure it as redeemable equity. So we're basically buying 4% of the next $2 million in revenue from these companies. And they're using that to repurchase our shares. So when they succeed, we succeed, which is one more reason why we like them to succeed.
So after they pay you back, then all lines are cut financially?
Everything's always more complicated than what it sounds like. The simple answer is no. They buy back half our shares using 4% of future revenues.
Yeah, so Africa Business Radio. In the U.S., radio stations make money through ads or there's public radio. So how do you make money?
Basically, we make money through the same means. We use sponsorship and advertising like any other radio station. But what we're also doing right now is that there are some content that are too premium to be given for free. And business executives actually pay between $1,000 and $5,000 to get access to these materials. So we kind of like simplify them, and we add a monthly fee to it.
So a couple good examples would be like, well, what on earth are these teams doing here, right? They seem pretty well figured out-ish. So we're in week 4, so I can't answer that question completely because we have another 6 weeks to go. But for example, Joel here from JoelX doing toilets. We're trying to figure out and making our way through what is the true ask going to be, right? So he won enough money to do the first toilet. I've given enough money to do the second toilet. What's the whole big opportunity look like? What's the real financial model look like? And how much do we need to raise? Right? And once we do that, introductions to investors to make it happen. With some other pieces like, the story is pretty compelling, but how do we tell that story so that people understand it in 5 minutes? For Brian here at Biogen Kenya, he walked in with a business that is not what he pitched today, which is fun. He walked in and applied to the business of biodiesel as a service. So to a restaurant, I will take your oil from you and return you biodiesel for your own use for a fee. And we have subsequently pivoted from that in a dramatic way, and he only told you half the story. For Soji at Africa Business Radio, it's up and running. It's 2 years old. It makes money on Google Ads. Question is like how to make it real now, how to make it big. And so we've been looking at lots of different models on what do you do with immediate property. And so my guess is we're going to wind up with a podcast network on top of a streaming radio station, but we don't know. We may wind up with an event programming company or two other ideas we're working on. BridgeCare was pretty polished when they came in. We're working on how to describe this problem better so that we get the first customers, hopefully before we leave the program. And so it started out pretty much, we finance childcare. That's nice, it's a good problem, it's just not big enough. In this case, we're not focusing, we're going bigger. For Golden Cat, they walked in with a totally different name. No real idea on how to talk about what they do. So now that's supposed to look like a sticker you would find on a piece of fruit, right? Yeah. So hopefully that does. The Africa Golden Cat is native to Rwanda. And then Zirconia, I won't even show you their logo. Their original logo is awful. And we are working through, what's interesting with them, we're working through whether or not it's a bootstrap company or a venture scale company. So they originally started off and they thought that this was a bootstrap company. The first sale would be everything they'd needed. And as we work through the details of getting into production, we're discovering that no, maybe in fact we'll just go raise $5 million instead, which should sound strange, right? But that's one of the realities of funding. You can raise $250,000, $500,000, or you can raise $5 million. Middle is kind of hard to do. So it's like, well, maybe we should go big. So we're still working that out. And that's the kind of stuff we work on. So everyone's a little different. They all vary depending on what their needs are. And in order to do these things with them, we, again, flood them with advice from lots of people with experience. All right, time for 2 more questions? Yep, okay, in the back.
Can you know that, how much subsequent money has flowed into your companies?
Well, again, so the question is how much more money has come in. That is not one of the things we track. We ask to be updated, but it's not a key metric for us. I just computed it the other day, and I think it's like $15, $18, $20 million. It's not, the reason why we don't track it is it doesn't talk about success. Raising money is a nice piece of news, but it doesn't tell you whether or not the company is going to succeed. Yeah?
How do you match your many mentors to companies?
Okay, so the question is, how do you match mentors? Mostly we don't. Mostly because we use this model of mentor whiplash, we're not looking for the perfect fit, we're looking for good enough fit. The way we get the meetings to happen is that we send out a Google Doc to all the mentors saying, here are the teams, and we do the one-line pitches next to the teams. Who do you want to help? Last choice is, I don't care, I'll help anyone. And I'd say half the mentors check off that box. And then we send the list of mentors to all the teams and say, pick who you want to be introduced to. And there's a one-line description of each mentor. And they go through that and send us very long lists of mentors, and we whittle it down. So there's a little bit of online dating that happens from the two ends. Mostly it's happenstance. And then we meet as a group. We're meeting every day, but we meet 3 times to talk about what's been going on. And they'll talk about which mentors they've met. And often they'll go, I just met Lori yesterday. You should really talk to her. And then we'll make that happen. So word of mouth as well.
Idea stage companies, how do you usually go about getting fundings to turn ideas into actual sales if investors don't invest in ideas?
All right, so the big question. Let's end on this one. So how do you solve the catch-22 of getting your first customers when you don't have any investors? Right. All right, so one book I highly recommend is The Lean Startup. I can summarize it, though, in a sentence, which is launch something someone can buy. Right? And so using that relentless resourcefulness, find a way to boil down what you think you're going to be doing into something that's testable. Go out to the world and try and sell it. Sometimes that means a smaller version of what you want to sell, in which case you can afford to do it. Sometimes what it means is a really nice looking website that looks like it's a product that's for sale. But in the end, when you get to the point where they say they want to buy it, you say, well, thank you, it's not actually for sale. But thank you for validating that you would buy it if it were for sale at this price. Because I needed that validation to go get investors. We'll get back to you. It does mean at times upsetting initial customers, which is something we would never have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Sometimes it's a Kickstarter. I got the video. It looks like I have the product. It looks like I'll make it if I get to this stage. But the Kickstarter, then proves that someone will buy it. And sometimes it's Dropbox. So if you don't know the story, it's in the book. Dropbox was in Y Combinator in like session number 2 or 3. That program was 12 weeks long, still is. They had to produce something in 12 weeks, and you can't build Dropbox in 12 weeks. It's just not possible. So they just did a video. They did a video on a one-page website with a box underneath saying, if you're interested, give us your email address. And they had 30,000 email addresses at the end of the 12 weeks. With 30,000 email addresses, you can walk into a venture capital firm and pitch, and they will say that's traction. All right, if you walk into Alliance of Angels, the big angel group in Seattle, with 30,000 potential customers, that is sufficient for them to get excited. Right? Maybe not enough to invest. They may still want to hold back, or they may want to tranche, or they may want to do a bunch of other things. But that could get you across the line. Right? So you got to do something. It is totally possible these days to make a website that looks just as good as any other website on the planet. Totally polished, looks like you're funded, looks like you have $10 million in the bank or $1 billion in the bank. You can do that in 2 days. So that's where you should start. Okay, and with that, hopefully I have most of your questions answered. I'll conclude by telling you, for all those aspiring entrepreneurs in the room, often you'll hear from your parents and your spouses and your siblings and your friends that starting a company is a crazy thing to do. I will assure you that they are all correct, that you are wrong. It is a crazy thing to do. Nonetheless, I've been doing it for 25 years. This is my 6th startup. I can't imagine doing anything else. It is possible to do this for a living, and that the world needs more entrepreneurs. So best of luck with you. Thanks.